Welcome to the Manobi Phygital Agriculture Podcast. I'm Ted George, founder and chief narrative officer of Kleos Advisory. In December, Manobi hosted a webinar exploring the potential for the next generation of agri-tech to transform Africa's agricultural sector. Phygital agriculture brings together two worlds, the bumpy, confusing reality of the physical value chain on the ground and the seamless, flexible digital world in the cloud. For too long, efforts to develop Africa's agricultural sector have floundered, despite an abundance of money, new tech solutions, and the willingness of all parties involved. What is needed is a new paradigm to transform this picture. And this paradigm is phygital agriculture. In this podcast, we will discuss the challenge facing Africa's agricultural sector and hear from members of the phygital agriculture ecosystem, the innovators, the bankers, the development institutions, insurers, and investors who discuss how we can work together to make this happen. For this discussion, I invited back Daniel Anarose and Fadel Ndiame, and they were joined by Dr. Stefan Kunz, Business and Invest Component Manager at GIZ Senegal, Mario Wilhelm, Head of Middle East and Africa Public Sector Solutions at SwissRe, and Landry Ahuansu, Investment Director of IFU Africa. I started our discussion by asking Fadel what, in his view, are the key challenges to implementing phygital agriculture in Africa.
I think we see three major challenges that needs to be overcome. The first one is access to finance. Second, we need to deal with the challenge with competition with imported rice, but that's today's market reality. Thirdly, you need to avail access to quality seed and mechanization. So those are the challenges that stand in front of us for us to capture the opportunities. Therefore, from that analysis, the opportunity we see is finding the proper financial system. It's basically a financial engineering play because of the nature of the risk and how different players may have to play a different role. I like very much the contribution from Brother Badji, who shows the leadership of the Islamic Development Bank in really attacking the rice challenge. So finance is a big deal. Secondly, we need to find effective way of upgrading mechanization services for farmers and millers, because part of the value is to be able to manage quality. And you need to win the fragmentation of having several types of varieties, different mills, different standard. It's very difficult to meet the competitiveness challenge. Thirdly, we need to have access to high quality seed that match what consumer want to see. And you need policy, import regulation. I like very much what Badji said. It's not realistic, given the magnitude of import, to think that we can have an import substitution in the next 2-3 years. I think we need to be very smart on how to work with the importers to create an incentive for them to also help commercialize the local production when it is possible.
That's great. Thank you very much, Fadel. Well, I wonder if I can move on to Stefan. GIZ is interested in innovation and has been working closely with Manobi to develop this phygital agriculture system. How can this phygital approach transform your involvement with Africa's agricultural sector?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for all the inspiring messages I got today. I mean, we are not only interested in working with Manobi, we are totally convinced about the approach. I mean, I'm coming from Asia, working there more than 20 years in the private sector. I mean, all the buzzwords have been said. And I want to focus particularly, if we talk about transformation, on food security in Africa and also the market, because that is also something we have to distinguish. To me, this is an African solution I was always dreaming about. And therefore, I mean, we have to consider that as a holistic approach. I'm really grateful that even the Islamic Bank is participating in this access, because without access to finance, I mean, what can we do? I consider our organization, it's something like a midway for this kind of approach, which has been elaborated by Daniel and his followers. Particularly in this time, which is dominated by climate change and Corona and all these issues. But this is a big chance for Africa to go in its own way to find own solution. That is the reason why we are very much interested to work in this complexity of partners, because I guess this can be really a structural change for a lot of other commodities. I'm personally working with Manobi actually in the value chain of cotton. And where we talked about only about agricultural experts and farmers and so on, but we also have to integrate the processing part, which might be another linkage. I mean, Dr. Fadeli already talked about mills. This is the same story. Consistently, we have to define who has which function in the value chain or supply chain. And I think what is very much necessary with regard to other systems which they propose, particularly in Europe, we have to adapt the system to the value chain. It's very much necessary also, particularly if you work with farmers or processors, but even with bankers. First of all, I mean, you can only attract them if you can maintain a personal relationship, which is particularly based on a technocratical development cooperation, always a big issue. I mean, working for a German organization. At the same time, I mean, this is an academic discussion, but we have to break it down to a certain level where people really understand what is the value of data. And I think that is another issue, that we have to make this kind of data architecture very clear to all the stakeholders, because at the end of the day, particularly for a bank, as we said, it's a risk management tool. Yeah, and we have to provide data, and we have to assure, as Daniel said, we have to assure the quality of data. I mean, for that purpose, you have to be present in the field. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing that as a field worker, I mean, almost my whole life. And this is always why we need to have all this holistic solution, but we have to make it very comprehensive. And this is starting, as you said, I mean, it's starting with the farmers. And then, I mean, if we talk about banks, this has already an abstract level. I just came from a conference where we just talked with a bank to give a processor of cotton, I mean, a spinning facility here in Senegal, give him a loan. And we came with this idea, and I explained him what we have in mind coming up. We call it traceability application. I mean, I don't care if we call it just phygital agriculture or whatever kind of system. To me, I mean, fighting for that issues for a long time, this is the solution. I can only wish that we find a common sense and promote what we actually do now with GIZ. I mean, this is not in competition to other solutions, because it's a holistic approach. And honestly, I haven't seen something like that in the last 30 years.
I wonder if I could move to you now, Mario, to get the insurer's perspective. Generally speaking, Africa's agricultural sector is very underinsured. Most farmers are not even aware that they can insure against the risk of crop failure or climate change. And so what I'd like to know is, how do you see the potential for phygital agriculture to de-risk the agricultural value chain and maybe to help you develop insurance products directly for it?
I would like to start actually with the three biggest challenges we are seeing when it comes to insurance topic. They all start with the A, so it's the three A's. It's the awareness, access, and affordability. So what does it mean? Awareness, as you just said, that most farmers, most people also on the African continent are actually not aware of what insurance can actually do, right? What's the value of insurance? And some of them had, negative experience with insurance products. So we as an industry have to change that, because insurance has a very important role to play, right? So we, in the end, help the farmer to de-risk. And we know farmers are very risk averse. So de-risking will help the farmer to take on more risk, to invest more, right? And then in the long term, also to participate from the growth in their business. So that's a big challenge, right? Awareness. And we have not cracked that yet. Second one is access to insurance. So we have now experience of around 10 years with insurance for smallholder farmers in Africa. I have to say, looking back, most of these projects have actually failed, right? So we have not achieved to reach the farmers at scale. And I'm convinced, right, we cannot do that in a one-to-one approach, right? So we have to find aggregators, right? We have to bundle insurance with other products and services that reach the farmers. That could be loans, right? Agricultural loans, could be agriculture inputs, seed and fertilizer. And there are also different concepts tested on the continent. Could also come with government programs. We also see that in some of the countries, but key point here is we need to be able to provide access at scale, right? And the question is, what kind of aggregators can we target? My last point is affordability, because the insurance value chain is simply too expensive, right? The unit cost of production insurance is geared towards the middle and upper class. And that means the fixed costs are quite high. and that make it almost non-affordable for the smallholder farmers. And that's exactly where technology comes in, right, on all these three challenges. I know awareness, I think with technology, we have the chance to reach many farmers at once, right? Not this one-to-one interaction. We can disseminate information quite broadly. Access, the same, right? We can use the mobile channel. M-Pesa was mentioned before in Kenya, which is also used, to facilitate payments, either premium payments or claims payouts. So we can leverage that also to access the farmer in a very efficient way. And the last point is affordability, right? If we also start digitizing the insurance value chain, we bring down this unit cost of production, in the end, make insurance more affordable to the farmers. And then instantly it also becomes a business case for the insurance industry, right? They start to get interested in agriculture insurance for smallholder farmers because they also see the commercial value in that.
I'd like to move to Landry now. Thank you for being patient, Landry. It's time to talk to the investors. Look, we've heard the whole story now, and the buck stops and starts with the investors. Do you see an opportunity for investment in phygital agriculture? And how can investors support banks so that they can finance local production? I'd also be interested to get your view, Landry, on prospects for investing in things like the Guarantee Fund.
The short answer to your first question, is there an interest in the phygital agriculture? Definitely yes. And in link with that, and I'm really happy to be here today because, as you said, how can investors support? Because as an investor, and I think it has been said, we buy risk. And in order to buy risk, you need at some point to be able to measure the risk. So when you have a business, will it be in agriculture and any other sector, it's a lot of risk. It's sort of a composition of risk. So you measure it, you de-risk up to what you can de-risk, and you price the remaining risk. So the good thing with digital agriculture is at the end of the day, it's helping us in doing both, measuring the risk, because in agriculture, the main challenge we have as an investor and also banks have is we don't have access to data. And if you don't have access to data, how do you want to price the risk? See? And I think this point has been touched upon by Mario, which is an insurer, and same, if you don't have data, you cannot price the risk and price an insurance. Otherwise, if you do it, then it's gonna be just so expensive at the end of the day, and the system, it won't flow in the system. So I'm very happy this initiative is in place. And also with the technology, it creates a sort of network, because that's the main challenge we have in Africa. Apart from my role at IFU, I used to work for the West African Development Bank, investing a lot in the agribusiness space, and especially in agriculture. And it has been said one more time. We have a lot of farmers, we have a lot of potentials, but we don't have a network. So when you take a country like Ghana, where I'm based, and a country like Ivory Coast, in the cocoa space, they are the world's top producers. But until recently, they were sort of dealing with the sector individually. But from the minute the energy together, then there's a synergy that was created from there. And I'm happy that with the digital and with the small farmers, then we're gonna create a network. We can control the sourcing, the storage facilities, all the logistics, which can generate an added value and make the whole system viable. Now, are we interested in financing, let's say, for example, the Guarantee Fund in that regard? Of course, yes. IFU, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, we have already done something similar with the SMEs. So in order to help the banks in issuing loans to SMEs, because it was the same problematic at some point, because the bank were not really familiar with the SME risk, because as you know, in this part of the world, most of them are like family-owned businesses. So we have created this guarantee fund, which was issuing guarantee to the bank that were willing to finance the SMEs. So this was sort of a leverage and a sort of an insurance to the banks to deliver a guarantee to SMEs. So I think the same system can be replicated in the agriculture, so that there is a fund which helps at some point the banks to sort of de-risk some transactions and serve as an incentive so that they can issue more financing, because at the end of the day, we are all doing this for sustainable development in our countries. And I don't think we can achieve that goal without focusing on agriculture, especially in this part.
Well, it's interesting also what you're saying about the guarantee fund in there and the opportunity for it. I wonder, Daniel, if I could just quickly bring you in. Having heard everything that we have now from the different panelists as well, what is it actually that you need? I mean, are you encouraged by what you hear about the different viewpoints and about how we can work together?
Definitively. I think we are together. We are all agree on something. We cannot continue looking at every segment of the value chain separately. That's something which is important. We have to look at it together. The credit, the insurance, the access to inputs, the access to seeds, the capacity to transform, the logistic, the extension services, everything is part of the value chain that we want to build. All the panelists mentioned that. Two, I like what Landry said, because definitively the way we present this ecosystem that we want to build together is sufficiently de-risked to allow bank supported by the proper financial instrument, that the one you mentioned, the guarantee fund, which can go to the bank, to finance this chain. If we can bring together the required information in order for every player to be comfortable in investing into this chain. And I think this is the opportunity we have to work with, particularly in this condition of COVID. We have around the table public sector, private sector, the development organization, banks, insurers, investors together right now. We are on the same page, and it seems that we are convinced that we can build the food sovereignty of this country by bringing transparency, bringing honorability into this value chain.
That's great. Thank you very much, Daniel. And I think it's interesting because you're talking about bringing everything to the value chain. And this really gets actually to one of the other nubs of the problem that we have, and also the strength of the solution, which is about scalability. How do we scale? What we don't want is islands of excellence. There's no point about having one area which is very nice and everything's running efficiently, and half a mile away they're burning down forest and they're doing whatever because there is no control at all. It has to be a scalable solution, and also one which can cross borders. So I wonder if I could just start with you, Mario. How do we achieve scalability?
Yeah, I already mentioned, right, the need to work with aggregators. Another observation is, we have to move away from pilots. Too often we have engaged in pilot projects, and the goal of the pilot was to prove the concept, right? But in not many cases, the long-term perspective came through. So I would actually advise, if you think about implementing a project, think big, right? How can you reach 1 million farmers? And then see the pilot project really as the test case where you can prove a concept, you can prove the technology to later scale it on. But to start a pilot on its own, without its long-term perspective, I would really advise to stop that.
No, thanks. That's very good. In fact, I was always told that whenever trying to propose a project, I should never call it a pilot. I should call it phase 1. Even if you don't have a phase 2, but it should always be going somewhere. I wonder, Fadel, could you give your views on that one as well? How do we scale?
Impact at scale is the name of the game. And I think the short answer, I'm glad that Landru and others refer to it, is cooperation. It's really bringing everybody together, everybody bringing their strength toward a common goal. Scale requires public investment to de-risk. Scale requires policies that are consistent, that are evidence-based, that use data. But also it's require having a delivery platform that can reach. And I like Mario, your 3A. I have 2 other A, but I will tell you in another time. You need to build it on analytics. You need then to be able to articulate a vision of success for all. And this is where, you're talking about the network. And I think this is where what Daniel and team are bringing is amazing, because it gives you not only a global perspective, but you also know what is localized. One of the challenges I have for Daniel and team is, how do we create value for the smallholder farmer? I can see how you create value for Landru. I can see how you can create value for Mario. But how do you create value for the smallholder farmer? By giving them visibility around the market, the resources, the technology, the return, and the risk they are taking, because they are probably the biggest investor. Building is really about financial architecture. How do you de-risk? How do you blend? How do you bring different resources so that typically the problem is not a problem of resources? My boss used to say, the challenge is not lack of resource, lack of order. How do you make sure that you can build a platform that use public money for certain things, use commercial money for other things, use investment money for other things? Against that infrastructure, I think the banks and private operators will do their job, but having full visibility. At the end of the day, you need trust and predictability.
Trust is the basis of all banking and all business relationships, ultimately. Stefan, I saw you nodding in approval there as well. Do you have some thoughts as well on this question of scalability?
Well, I only can confirm what all the other gentlemen have said. I think we just have to be aware that we should invest all our competencies. As you said, Mario, I mean, this can be not something which is fragmented or project. I mean, I would consider that as an initiative. Movement might sound a little bit too politically, but on the other hand side, I mean, to me, working in this field for a long time, this is a solution. And we have done similar things in Asia. But the good thing is now, I mean, we talked about the boost of IT. And this is probably the only beauty of Corona, that people have realized what IT can do if we come up with a transparent architecture of data and provide access to data which are relevant. A bank like the Swiss bank might relate to other data than a processor we have like in the cotton industry, but this is something which can be easily elaborated.
That's great. Thank you very much. And Landry, your views on scalability? I can imagine when it comes to investment, you're in multiple different countries. Scalability must be one of the things you're looking for to actually get the return.
Yes, definitely. And I can join my voice to everything that has been said so far on scalability, where at some point we are looking at the economies of scales and the transaction cost. So when we have a small sample and we deploy something on this small sample, then we have a transaction cost associated to that. So scaling this initiative and bringing it to another level will also encourage the investors to look at the transaction. Because if you look, especially in this part of the world, in the agribusiness space, we sort of put a general sentence saying there's not much financing to the agricultural space. But that's not totally true. When you have large farms, because I've worked a lot in Ivory Coast, for example, they are like large corporations that have like thousands of hectares. They have access to the financing. But the small farm holders, they are the ones that don't have access to this financing.
That's great. Thank you very much, Landry. Well, I'm afraid we're almost out of time, but there is time for one more question, and I'd like to ask it to all of you. And the real question here really is, where do you see the real opportunity? Where is the real area that each of you can move on this opportunity for phygital agriculture in the coming year, as hopefully we get into the post-COVID world? So maybe if I could start with you, Fadel, where do you see as the biggest opportunity next year for making a real step forward with the phygital world?
I think we have such a huge opportunity to start coming together to make it happen. It's a win-win game, but it requires clarity on the vision, what is success, what are the underlying values, fairness, commitment, inclusiveness, sustainability, etc., and what are the concrete modalities of working together and becoming accountable. For me, that's the opportunity I see. I think it's possible now, and it takes leadership. And I want to thank Daniel and the team for an amazing leadership. My organization is totally committed. I'm personally totally committed to that because I think that's the opportunity of our generation.
Maybe Stefan, if I could have your idea, where do you think there's the most opportunity for you next year with phygital?
I think the opportunity relies into the contact to the industry. I mean, we talked about the market in the first beginning, and that's what we are actually doing. I just have sent Daniel an SMS that we got already in contact with huge European buyers for textile. I mean, who have to comply with sustainability standards. It needs to have a sustainable approach and a holistic approach, which is really market and business driven. Yeah, and I also have to say, out of my experience, I'm a little bit doubtful with all the smallholder issues because this cannot be the future for the next 15 to 20 years. And that means we have to create also other jobs. And I mean, it's always the same. And that's what we're discussing here with the farmers in the south of Senegal for cotton. At the same time, we have to upscale it. But if we get more volume with regard to cotton, I mean, we also can increase the processing part. And this is, I guess, this is a big challenge for all of us.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down to this thing of having value addition industries that actually add value and that don't chew up capital. And Landry as well, where do you see the real opportunity next year in phygital?
Yeah, and in connection to what Stefan has just said, I mean, there's a huge opportunity because as an investor, for example, we are looking a lot in the manufacturing industry. And most of the time, the challenge that we are facing is, let's say, for example, the sourcing part of the raw material is a real challenge. So when you have an agribusiness firm, they come with a very strong project on the paper. But then when you look at how they're going to get the raw material, then it becomes a challenge. Or sometimes they do have it, but they are obliged. I mean, we are in Africa, we have the soil, we have the good weather, but they are obliged to import. It's an additional cost and a lot of additional things that come into the balance at the end of the day. So definitely there's a huge opportunity in there for next year if we can level up so those small farmers so that they can scale up and work in a network. Then we are sort of solving two problems at the same time. Agricultural side and the manufacturing side, knowing that farmers are going to help the industry, and in reverse, the industry is going to help the farmers. And it will sort of answer one of the questions that were asked, which was to identify how we create value for those small farm holders. If we have a strong industrial sector, at some points, we create value, and it would just be a matter of monitoring how this value is going to the farmers. As now, we still need to create that value before making sure it's going to the farmer.
Absolutely. Well, it's about synergy, isn't it, and cooperation. And Mary, maybe just a last word as well on where you see the opportunity in terms of insurance.
Fadel actually prompted me to add another A to my toolbox, right, which is the analytics. And if we discuss fragmented value chains, right, integrating different stakeholders, taking a systemic approach, I think we cannot afford to have digitally fragmented value chain in the sense of that we have data silos, right, that we have different IT systems around. So the big question would be how to bring that together in a digital world.
Absolutely, yeah, beautiful. I also actually have updated my alphabet as well. We always used to talk, or the last few years, about the ABCD of trade finance, which was, of course, ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Louis Dreyfus. Today, of course, it is AI, blockchain, cloud, and data, big data. So things are changing very much. I wonder, Daniel, would you like to have a last word on your hopes for next year and what you hope to achieve with Manobi and Accelerate?
We already have 2 million hectares of rice right now. It's our pilot, okay? 2 million hectares is 20% of the cropping area over the continent. It's a big market. I think we can focus our efforts on this value chain. Cotton is a program that we are running with GIZ, but also this rice value chain, and demonstrate at scale that we can, for these particular crops, create the food sovereignty that we are dreaming of since a long time right now. That's the opportunity. All the people around the table together, we can do it. And I would like to continue this discussion with you and with enlarging the network, Mario. Continue with you, Stéphane. We are not only working on cotton, but also thanks to with the support of GIZ, we are promoting in Africa Rice, we are promoting the development of the proximal network of agents on the ground with the Accelerant Academy. And with you, Landry, we know since the financial crisis of 2008, commercial banks have to follow some regulations, particularly the Basel II and III rules are applied right now. And I think that with this concept of guarantee fund that we just discussed, that's something we have to develop together and see how we can address the need of this value chain and continue developing the solutions that will help us to create trustability, traceability, transparency, and honorability into this value chain for the sustainable food sovereignty of the continent.
That was Daniel Anna-Rose, CEO of Manobi Africa. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you to all my panelists for a rich and wide-ranging discussion. I hope this podcast has helped illuminate the potential for phygital agriculture in Africa, as well as the need for collaboration between innovators, bankers, insurers, and investors in order to make it a reality. If you would like to see my opening presentation on the challenge of financing Africa's agricultural sector, as well as case studies of Manobi's Accelerant platform and the Regional Rice Value Chain Program, you can view all three on the video podcast which accompanies this podcast. And look out for further webinars and podcasts in Manobi's Phygital Agriculture series on the company's LinkedIn and Facebook channels. Thanks for listening.